today just we'll cover the high level topics actually. Yeah, so we'll get into Studio from day two. Um, the basic concepts we'll just talk about it today. Okay. Uh, so before we get into Studio part, if I start from AIB, Core Connector, and Studio, and then we have let me put it over here, end-to-end connector. Yeah. So now, I understand both of you have some basic knowledge about Workday. I will just touch upon how what type of integration that we have and how we build or how we design an integration when there is a requirement comes to you. Okay, so on a very high level, if you ask me, so if it is a full file, right, the requirement is like you have to fetch employee data and then send the data to downstream systems. That's your requirement, and they want all the active employees. Let's put that way, right? So it's a one data source that we are delivering to one downstream system actually, right? Which is like a one-on-one actually. So the moment you hear, I want full file and my data source is one, right? Data source is, so let's put this way, one data source, right? So one data source, and then my delivery also one delivery, right? So if this is your requirement, by default, you will be going for EAB because the moment you see full file and one data source, you are going to use it, and the delivery also one. When I say delivery is one, you're delivering it to one downstream system actually, right? If this is your requirement, 90% of the time we will be using EAB. Okay, there are exceptions actually. Using EAB, we can deliver Delta also, but don't get confused. We'll just talk about it a little later. So, for example, um, there is a business process transactions that we have, for example. Okay, and you're asked to send on a daily basis how many hires are completed. Then you will be creating a report, and that report will have uh, a filter criteria. In that filter criteria, we will use the date parameters to get the delta. Okay, that's how we send the delta using report and EIB. Okay, but again, that's an exception case I'm talking about here. The moment you see one data source, one delivery system, and then you want full file, 90%, 99% it is going to be EIB integration only. Okay. And the same, if we go for CC, which is core connector, this is also one to one. And here also one data source and one delivery. But the only difference here is the moment they say delta, that's when you will be using core connector. Yeah. One-on-one full file EAB, one-on-one core connector, and they want delta, then you will be going for core connector. So in core connector also, we have selected the templates actually. Correct. When I said
Mhm.
selected templates, core connector worker is there, position is there, job profile, job requisition, right? Like that, these are all the core connector templates we have it. So if the ask is, okay, I want location data to be sent and it should be a delta file, which means first run you will be sending all the locations. After that, whatever the additions or deletions or update that we have, you have to send only the delta, right? Then by default, you'll come and check whether this core connector template is available for that particular object. And if that particular object is having uh, a, a template, then we can go and use the core connector. Yeah, delta, one source, one delivery. then by default you should go for a core connector. Any questions? Now end-to-end connector. So if you ask me, end-to-end connector should be on top actually. Okay. So here again the requirement is there, and the moment you get a requirement, the order should be like, is there any end-to-end connector Workday has delivered? Then you have to check for that end-to-end connector. If there is no end-to-end connector, you should check, is there any CC that is available, which is nothing but a core connector that is available or not. Yeah. Core connector that is available or not. If core connector is available, then we have to use that type of integration. If core connector also not available, then we should go for EABs. If EABs are not available, then we have to go for Studio. So this is the order in which we will develop.
Suresh, just a quick
Mhm.
question regarding that end-to-end connector. You meant to say that regarding the vendor-based connectors or
Correct. Vendor-based connectors. So,
vendor-based
so,
functional?
so here, for example, ServiceNow, for example, right? CSOD, for example.
Okay.
Yeah. Or if it is a payroll-based integrations, if it is a payroll-based integration, then we need to check, do we have a GPC connector which is available? Do you have an idea what is GPC connector?
No,
Global
Suresh.
payroll connector. Yeah, global payroll connector, we call it actually, right? So,
Okay.
so your organization is using uh, okay, let's put one country, India, for example, right? So you
Mhm.
want to use payroll for India, but they are using some tool called, have you heard, Ceridian or ADP?
Yeah.
Yeah. So these are all the payroll vendors actually, right? So if you want to create an integration and they say it's a payroll integration, then we have to go and check whether these tools, my payroll vendor is having a GPC connector, which is nothing but Ceridian and Workday or ADP and Workday are in alignment to create web services, both the sides actually, right? So Workday will say, okay, I'm going to give you this web service feed, and Ceridian or ADP will say, okay, I'll consume as it is. Tomorrow, if there is any change in Workday web service, then both the team will say that, okay, I'm going to add one new tag and you have to adjust your feed to receive that tag actually, right? So that's a mutual between products, and they will create the end-to-end connector actually. So in this case, we are not doing any coding actually, right? So what we are doing here is we are we will get a username and password to connect to their systems and then feed those credentials. And in case if it has to be encrypted, then fill the encryption key, and that's it. Rest all will be taken care by the connector. Clear? Any questions on endpoint connector?
No.
Uh, okay. So So the moment you get a requirement, you check whether end-to-end connector is available. And if it is available, then we should use end-to-end connector. If end-to-end connector is not available, then next one is core connector. Core connector is having, the object that you are looking for is is available or not, that you are going to check. And if the template is available, the object is available, and if the ask is delta, then you will go for a CC. And if the object is not available, then the template is not available, then we will go for a EAB. And if all these options are not possible with your uh, for your requirement, the last option only should go for a studio. So this is the flow that Workday themselves are suggesting, right? So because studio is nothing but a custom integration. So custom integration means this is a maintenance actually, right? Someone from my integration side or an integration consultant only can go and update the studio and then technical stuffs actually. So this should be your last option when you go for a studio. So the moment you say studio, it is a custom integrations actually. Yeah. So custom integrations, and here many to many or one to many or um, many to one or one to one. Yeah. So for all these options, when I say many to many, so many data sources, I'll use the word DS here after. Yeah. So many data sources, but you want to deliver to one delivery. So when I say many data sources, so what do I mean? So here you want to use like two reports and two web services, right? And deliver this data to one downstream systems or one delivery. Okay. Or the other option is okay, I think that's end actually. Okay, that's fine. Or the other option is like you have two reports and two web surveys and deliver to multiple locations or multiple deliveries. Yeah. So this is when you will go for studio integrations. You need a complex logics that needs to be completed. Okay. So you can't do it as part of CC, CC core connector or EAB. Then you will go for a studio actually. So, so this is the order in which we will decide which integration we will go for a requirement actually. Okay. Any questions on how, when are we going to select which integration, what type of integration? Yeah, let's have more. So when you develop integration in Workday, this is the order in which you have to decide which integration will suit my need actually, right? So you got a requirement and you're going to check whether delivered end-to-end connector is available. So for example, ServiceNow, CSOD, GPCs, like these are all payroll vendors. Uh, you are going to develop an integration, then you will check whether delivered end-to-end connector is available. If it is available, then you'll be using an end-to-end connector. And then if the requirement does not meet that end-to-end connector requirement, then we'll go for a core connector. And your requirement says, I want Delta file. Delta file is nothing but on a day-to-day basis, you want to send new employees hired data, for example, right? Then in
Mm-hmm.
that case, you will be sending one-time full data, which is like all the employees will be sending. After that, new employees that are hired, you will be sending. That is that we call it as delta. It is not just a
Okay.
new employees.
Okay.
Any changes to the existing employees also, any change to the field of interest that we have, that we call it as delta file actually.
Okay.
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 So if that is your requirement, then we will be sending, I mean, we'll be using core connector. For core
Mm-hmm.
connector, we will be using one data source and one delivery. And
Mm-hmm.
if it is a delta file, we will go for a core
So
connector
any
template.
file which is expected to going forward will change, then you will go for the core connector kind of.
Not file, the field of interest. You have 10 fields. And if
Mm.
there is any change to those 10 fields of a particular object, then we will go for a delta.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Then the third one is EAB. So now I want employee data to be sent, but all the days I want the integration to be sending all the employees full file data, active employee data, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which means if there are 10,000 employees, every day you'll be sending 10,000 employees.
Okay.
Okay, that's what we call it as full file actually. So if that is your requirement, irrespective of change, just go and pick up all the full file. When we will be sending full file, if you ask me. So for example, locations, job profiles, right? So these are all, we call it as reference data. So this reference data, most of the customers will ask, you have to send the data as a full file. So that's when we'll go for a full file actually. When we will go for a delta file, employees transaction data that I wanted, but I want only if there is any change happened, right? That's when we'll go for a delta actually. Yeah. So now this is
So,
easy, and then Mhm.
might be the right time or not. Once you send a file with EIB,
Mhm.
so we figure it out that that file need to be modified or any changes are required. Do we go for the core connector for it again?
No. Okay. So two ways we can do it actually. So now this is our core actually, right? So when we call it as core, this is your parent integration. So you want delta file, you got the file. So this is going to give one XML output, right?
Hmm.
So this XML output, do you want to consume as it is, or you want to do a transformation, right? You want to do a transformation. The transformation can be done in all the stages actually. In CC also we can do, EAB also we can do, Studio also we can do. The moment you
Okay.
want a transformation, then we will add an additional integration or child integration that is called DT. Okay, document transformation. So using this DT, the XML output will be transformed and then given to the downstream system based on how they want it actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Mhm.
So DT we will have, and then we will deliver it actually. Yeah. The same way, EIB also you can have export. You can get XML output, you can get a CSV output, or you can get a
Thanks.
JSON. Yeah, JSON, G format, which is nothing but a Google format. So all these formats you will be getting it in EIB. But you want to do any transformation, right? You got an XML output of, or you got a EIB output file, but there is a transformation that is planned. Then we have to select XML as your output file and then go for a transformation. Yeah, transformation. When we go for a transformation by default, DT we can go. Otherwise, the EAB itself will have a XSLT option actually. Okay, there are two ways we can do it. Yeah, so we can do
Mm.
a direct XSLT which we can attach as part of EAB, or we can add a document transformation and then deliver the file. Both options we can do it
Yeah.
if you want to go for a transformation.
Just a quick question,
Mhm.
Suresh. Which would you think would be the best option, whether it's XSLT or DT? Just asking
Okay,
out of
I
curiosity
got it.
for EIB.
For EAB. So
Mhm.
here, it'll be again. Okay, we have to go a little more detail then. Okay. Uh, have you heard um, XTT and ETV?
Yes, I heard of that. Yeah.
Okay, how about others? XTT, ETV?
No.
No? Okay. So if you want to use, okay, what is the use of XTT, ETV? Let's put it this way. So you are using XSLT. Okay. In XSLT, especially in EAB XSLT, you can't use XTT ETV functions. Why you can't use it? Because it's a Workday developed classes. Okay. So why did Workday develop these ETV and XTT classes? Most of the customers will consume the data from Workday either as an XML file or CSV file, right? Most of the customers, most of the integrations, let's put 90% of the integrations wants the output file in the XML or CSV format. So XTT is for CSV format and ETV is for XML format. Where is it? This is for XML format. So where type from CSV or ETV format. In XSLT, okay, now the requirement is coming like that. So I want to export all the employee data to downstream system. Okay, but if the employee name is more than 10 characters, okay, employee name is more than 10 characters, you have to truncate the name that is coming after 10 characters. And you have to send the data back to Workday saying that, hey, I got an employee which had like 12 characters, but I truncated to 10. And this employee have lost the last two characters. Okay, so which means you are transforming and then sending the information back to event. Right? I hope you are following, right? If you want to send the message back to Workday event, you have to go for DT and XTT ETV. If you don't have any uh, requirement, like you have to send the data back to event, then you can go for XSLT.
So here,
Am I clear?
Suresh, event in the sense you are sending the data back to Workday and making a change in Workday, or
No.
okay,
You are running an integration, right? So
okay,
that's an event actually. You are running an integration. Okay, so the EAB integration has run. Okay, let's put that. So it has given 100 output file actually. Okay, so XML is your output file. Okay, and it has 100 employees. In that 100 employees, 90 employees have there are no errors. Okay, then 10 employees are having 10 employees are having a validation actually. So validation is nothing but we have a first name validation. So this 10 employees validation, we have to tell the system or tell the business that for this 10 employees, I ran a validation and that failed validation. So I have truncated the names. So tomorrow, you send the data. So you got a Suresh Ram Kumar, for example. Okay. So that's a big name actually, right? So Suresh Ram Kumar, you want to send only 10 characters and you send the 10 you send the 10 characters only to the downstream system, but the downstream system comes back and says, hey, he should be Suresh Ram Kumar. But why you are sending only 10 characters, which is like Suresh Ram only you are sending, right? What happened to the remaining characters? Then you should be able to go and check that particular integration. What happened to that employee? Why we have sent only, Suresh Ram and why not Suresh Ram Kumar, right? So this is the logging information, validation information that we are capturing and then storing it as part of the event. Make sense?
okay. So it's more like a validation purpose,
Validation purpose only.
depending on the
Correct.
requirement of the vendor. That's it, right?
Correct. Correct.
Oh,
If there is that's why I said if there is a requirement as such, we have to do a validation, and that's when we'll go for a DT come
DT.
XTT
Okay,
and ETV.
okay,
If there
makes
is
sense.
no validation that we are doing, that we have to send it back to integration event, then we will go for XSLT only. Yeah. And in XTT, ETV, there are many classes that Workday developed actually, right? Uh, uh, you want to check what is the length of a string actually, right? Then they have a class and then there is a function that is written field length. You just put field length of that particular property, then you will get the length of that actually. Okay. So in XSLT also we can do it, but you have to write a lot of code actually, right? If there are like 20 lines of code you are writing in XSLT, whereas in XTT it is just going to be one function because it is pre-written already. Yeah. So that's how EIB, XSLT, which type of transformation you are going to do? Is it a XSLT based or DT based? In DT based, am I going to use XTT or ETV, right? That is everything is going to be based on your requirement. We good? Any other questions on EIB?
No.
Okay,
Hmm.
good. Good to know. So now, Studio, we talked about it. Let me. So now in Studio, so before we jump into Studio, we'll be using RAS calls actually. Correct. How many of you have an idea what is RAS call? Or, or I'll
It's a
just
report as
report.
service.
Yeah. So here RAS is nothing but a report as a service. so that we call it as RAS. Why do we need RAS actually, right? Let's go a little more on. I'll just put it as a custom report probably. Right. So custom reports, you can create custom report. So custom report is nothing but you create a report based on the requirement. To create a report, you need a data sources, right? So data source is nothing but a temporary table in case if you're coming from a database background. So it's a kind of temporary table which collects the data from the object and give it as one data source actually, right? So there are like 10 objects are there, but you can't use all the objects in one report. Instead, what it will do, your data source will take the necessary fields from those 10 objects and then it will create a view actually. Okay. So if you're coming from a DB background, you'll understand what I'm talking. So otherwise, data source is nothing but all the fields from the objects that are available as part of the data source. So we need one data source, right? And that data source will define what is the data that you wanted. The custom report can be created as simple, advanced, and matrix. There is one more also we have. I'll not talk. Probably I'll say composite actually. Okay. There are many other report types that we have it actually, Nbox report and other reports we have it. But for an integration consultant, we need simple or advanced reports. Okay, so we don't use matrix or composite in integrations. You know why? Because matrix reports and composite reports cannot be enabled as a service actually. In fact, simple also. So only advanced report can be enabled as a service, which is nothing but a RAS actually, right? So report as a service is possible only for a advanced report. Okay. So you create a report and then you enable that report as a service, then that report will be available outside of Workday tenant also. Yeah. So why do I need a custom report for Studio, or why am I talking here? Because in Studio we can get data from two sources. One is custom report, which is enabled as a service, or a web service, right? Which is APIs actually, which is provided by Workday. Okay, these two are the only options through which we will get the Workday tenant data into Studio. Are we clear?
Suresh, quick
Mm-hmm.
question.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you said there are two ways we can do. So imagine a scenario where there is a output file coming from a completely different application, and I have to pick that from that application and put it into Workday. So if either it's a studio or somewhere, I need to pick it up. So uh, how how do we do that? For example, if there is an application that just delivered a
Understand.
random file,
Understand.
random
Understand. So
file.
this what I'm talking about is for outbound actually.
Okay,
Okay. So
okay,
this is for output, okay, or output integration. I'll come there actually. It will be
okay,
covered
okay,
later. Yeah.
okay,
Okay.
okay, no
So
problem.
this is mainly for output integration actually. I'll come for the studio part. Now it is just only the custom report I'm talking about because tomorrow I'm going to use custom report in studio. So you should know why I'm using custom report actually, right? So
Okay,
custom report, one data source. These are all the type of reports that we can create. For studio, we need report as a service, and it should be uh, a advanced report. That's when we can use the custom report. Okay, any questions? I'm not going deeper on custom reports. When we create a report, I'll just show, right? So, but you have to have an idea about what this is about actually. Okay. Any other questions from anyone? I will jump into Studio. So in Studio, we can create the type of integration that we can create in Studio, right? Uh, that's what. So here we can create a inbound integration, and then we can create a outbound integration, and then we can create a boomerang integration. And we have one more which is called bidirectional, okay, which very rarely we use this actually. So no need to, this is nothing but, okay, I'll come from top actually. Okay, so inbound integration. So here, this is a question, right? Karthik, you asked, right? So your vendor, any ex vendor is sending the file, and you have to load the data or consume the data into Workday, vendor to Workday. This is inbound integration, right? And then outbound integration, you have a data in Workday, and you have to send the data to downstream system. That's when we'll go for a outbound integration. So here in Boomerang, we'll go for a Workday. We'll pick the data from Workday, and then we'll send the data within Workday. That's why it is Boomerang. You get the data from Workday and then update the data in Workday itself. Yeah. And then bidirectional, you get the data from vendor, and then you update the data in Workday and then send the data back to vendor. Yeah. So these are all the 4 type of integrations that we can create using Studio. Any questions in this 4 type of integrations?
No, sir.
Hello? All can follow, right? Anshuman, Anita?
Yes.
Okay. Super. So now these are all the type of integration that we can create in Studio. So now we'll go a little more detail on inbound integration. Okay, so Studio inbound integration. Now, you tell me what are all the uh, what are all the requirement that we'll get? Probably Karthik, you mentioned that you get the requirement is like you get a file, a vendor delivers the file, right?
Yeah.
And then in Workday, you have to pick the file and process it actually. And this is on a very high level actually. Correct.
Yeah, that's correct.
Now vendor is sending a file. That file details are something like an employee data, you're getting it. Okay. So employee data is there in the file. And when you design a studio integration, right? When you design a studio integration, you have to ask these questions. So I'm getting a file. Is that file having any data that needs to be validated with Workday, right? Uh, so the first is Workday validation. And then the second one is there is a file that you are receiving, and that file has like 10 fields. In that 10 fields, how many are um, how many are mandatory fields and how many are optional fields? For the mandatory fields, we need a field validation. All right? So we do a Workday validation and then we do a field validation. Once that is done, we will prepare web service to post the data. For posting actually. So posting is nothing but feeding the data into Workday and then go for a logging, right? So when I say logging, you got a file. That file has 100 employees data, for example. You're trying to process the file into Workday, right? And then you notice that the vendor has sent a data in that 10 employee IDs are not available in Workday, right? When it is not available in Workday, can we update the data into Workday?
No.
Yeah, because you're updating an employee data into Workday, then you need that particular employee to be available in Workday. Then only you can update the data into Workday, right? So if the employee himself is not available in Workday, then you can't update. So that's when we do a Workday validation to check whatever the data that you have sent is available in Workday or not. That's what we call Workday validation. That's one. Now to update employee data, I need minimum like 5 fields. That is mandatory fields that I needed that I wanted actually. Okay, but there are 5 fields which are mandatory and 5 fields which are optional. Okay, so mandatory and 5 are optional. I want to put a field validation. If these 5 fields are present, that's when I will go and update into Workday. Otherwise, my web service will throw error. I can't post the data into web service, so it is going to throw error. So I should not post the data into Workday. Be clear? So I have to put a field validation to make sure these 5 fields are there. If the remaining 5 optional fields are not there, not a problem because it is not going to fail my Workday posting. So I can just ignore even if the data is not filled. That's why we call it as optional actually, right? So, but in my validation, I'll check whether these 5 mandatory fields are present or not. If it is present, then I'll be posting the data. At the end, there are 100 employees, 10 employees are not available in Workday, and then you think that uh, there is another 10 employees, field validation failed. Okay. Then in that case, I need to tell uh, to the customer or business that I received 100 employees, 90 employees are successfully processed or successfully processed, 10 employees failed due to Workday validation, right? And then 10 employees are failed due to field validation. Detection, right? So your log file should have this information. Why do we need this log file, right? Again, vendor has sent the data, so their expectation is I sent 100 employees, all the 100 employees will be updated in Workday. But due to validations, we can't update all. Sorry, this is not 90, this is 80. Yeah. So we can't update all, and we have to tell business, I received 100, but only 80 employees successfully processed. Remaining 10 plus 10 are failed due to so and so reason. Then what will happen? Business will pick up this log file and then send this data back to the vendor saying that these 20 employees did not update in Workday due to this reasons. Can you reprocess those files, right? So if there is an issue on the fields that they were sending, then they'll be populating all the mandatory fields and they'll send it again, then it will get processed again. If the Workday validation, if it is failing due to employee ID is not present, then this employee ID validation, so Workday validation, whether they'll check whether the employee ID is correct or not. If they have sent wrongly, then they will update the employee ID and then send the file in the next run so that it will pick up and update it. Okay. So on a very high level, when you design a studio integration, this is how your thought process should be. Okay. This is your thought process. And when you sit with the customer and you have to ask the relevant questions, is there any validation, Workday validation that we have to do, field validation that we have to do? Is there anything else that I have to, is there any maps that I have to use? So, for example, uh, I'm going a little detail, but okay, I'll not go for the maps now. Okay, maps are nothing but um, your vendors are sending uh, mail okay, gender we are getting as a field actually, right? They are sending us a mail in the field list, whereas in Workday we have to pass it as M, for example, or other way around, right? They are sending us M, whereas in Workday you have to send it as a mail actually. Then what you have to do, you have to transform this M to male actually, right? F to female, correct? So instead of going for a transformation, what I can do, I can use maps, and then using maps, I'll say if I get M from my vendor, then you map it to male and send the data into Workday as male. Okay. If it is female, we are getting it. F, we are getting it. Map it as female and then send the data to Workday as female. That's how the maps works actually. Okay, we'll come to that. This is on a little early stage. I'll come to that. So all these questions should be asked to the vendor. What kind of integration, what kind of logging, what kind of in the logging, what kind of fields that you wanted. So I'm telling 80 employees got success actually, right? So the log file, we can say that first record like employee ID and then employee name, employee name, or uh, we have, if it is a position data that we are updating, then what is the position ID, right? And then the message. The message is nothing but a success or failure, actually. Correct. So this is how you want a log file, or you want any other fields that you wanted, right? So you have to plan your log file also based on the business requirement or vendor requirement. Yeah. When we create Studio integration, we'll just show how to create a log file and how to put the field names and how we pass the values. Everything we'll just go through it. Okay. So this is for a Studio inbound integrations. Any questions here, guys? These are all the basic ones that you should be knowing when you develop an integration. You should be having this idea actually. Any question?
So mostly we are using bidirectional integration, right, for vendors.
No, no. Bidirectional we use very less actually. So bidirectional is nothing but um,
So
let's
whatever we are giving the response, like 80 record inserted and 10 record failed, that
no,
is
we will
under.
not be sending this data. No, we will not be sending this data to vendor
Oh,
actually directly because vendor will not have access to Workday.
okay, okay. But
Okay,
the
that's why.
log we are getting, can we share
Mhm.
that with the vendor? I mean,
This is where, yeah, correct. So how they want to share it is up to the business actually. So
okay,
now, because Workday, uh, you have access to Workday, you have access to this log file, but you don't want to give the access to everyone actually, right? So that's when we will have an integration team to download this file and then send that to vendor saying that, hey, this is failed. That is one way. Or the other way, we can put a notification actually, right? Email notification, we can configure it. In the email notification, we can attach that log file and then send the data, send the email to the vendor. That also we can do, right? Or business will check and the data is relevant or not. They can check and then they can reach out to vendor. Many ways we can do it, but
okay,
vendor will not have direct access to Workday.
okay, okay. But by
Okay.
emailing, I mean, we can, I mean, configure emails, right, from
Yeah,
Studio.
we can configure email. That's why I
Yeah.
said different customers, different way of doing it actually,
Okay,
right?
okay, got it.
So we have multiple options. Whichever options customer is opting for, we can go for that option.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
The only question I had was, how you filter out those validations. For example, he has given data in a raw format. I'm saying,
Hmm.
Workday has specific fields, right? You said employee ID and employee.
Correct.
If he has given it in a completely different, I would say, column names or something like that, that validation in Studio, is it possible, or we have to first change that file to our requirement and then put it in Studio? So,
Okay, got your question. But that's where we do the mapping actually.
oh, okay, okay,
Okay.
Okay,
So
makes
we
sense.
create a mapping sheet. So that mapping sheet uh, will have the details. Okay, so that mapping sheet is nothing but in Workday, I have the field name as worker ID. Okay, but whereas in vendor, he has it as employee ID. Okay, so in my mapping sheet, I'll say the file will have the name, column name as employee ID, where sorry, it's other way around, right?
Mm.
Uh, in file we will have the column name as worker ID, whereas in Workday I will have as employee ID. I'm going to map this worker ID to employee ID. So this mapping sheet, this is the first exercise that we do when we create an integration or when we sit for a discovery session, right? So generally in Workday, we call it as discovery session. We sit and then ask, okay, so what are all the fields that you wanted? Then we will get all the field list from vendor and then say, okay, I want this XYZ uh, or ABC like that. There are 10 fields. First, they will be giving it that I will be sending this 10 fields. Then as a Workday integration consultant, our job is to go and check how these fields are representing in Workday, or you have to identify which fields are linked to this vendor fields. And then you come up and say, okay, worker ID is linked to employee ID, your XYZ data is linked to position, all right? And then the next one is linked to job profile. Like that, you will do the mapping. So you get the input file with all the columns, and then you map it, and then you pass the data into Workday. That's how we do it.
Okay, okay, yeah, thank you.
Okay, good. And in Studio integrations, okay, so since Anshuman, you talked about this bidirectional one, if you, okay, in my experience, I would have developed like at least 400, 500 integrations. Bidirectional, we have developed like 3 or 4 in that 500 actually. Okay. And why it is very less, especially bidirectional one, vendor will say, I'm sending 100 data. Okay. And then in Workday, you go and update 100 data. And then vendor says, you send all the data that is updated along with some other fields. Then you send output only for those 100 data that we received from vendor. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are 10,000 employees, but I'm not going to send all the 10,000 employees to the downstream system. Instead, in that 10,000 employees, the vendor is asking information for only 100 employees. Then I'll go and fetch those 100 employees data and then send only those 100 employees data only.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's when we'll go for a bidirectional. So this is, as I said, this is very rare actually. Okay. Only one customer have used. Otherwise, no. In this 4 type of integrations. Inbound integration to Workday. So this is the integration that is widely used for Studio because you want to update data into Workday, then you have only 2 options. One is either you have a EAB or core connector inbound, which is already defined. So you'll be getting a template and using the template, you will be posting the data, or you will be using Studio to update it. The template for inbound, hardly we have like, handful actually, it is not more. So the moment the requirement is you are going to update data into Workday, then Studio is the option 90% of the time. So inbound integration is the most used Studio integration other than all this 3. Okay. The next one, outbound integration will come in because for outbound, we have these options actually. You have a core connector, you have an EIB. So many integrations, outbound integrations will fall into this category, or end-to-end connector will fall into this category. Only integrations that are complex where you need multiple data sources, that's when you'll go for outbound integration. Okay, so the percentage of Studio outbound integrations are less compared to inbound integration. Boomerang, if you develop 200 integration, Boomerang will be like 1 or 2 integrations for this is like a ad hoc job actually, bad job you want to do. So that's when we'll go for a Boomerang integrations. Okay, bidirectional 1 in 1,000. We good? with respect to type of integrations,
Yes.
inbound
Yeah,
integration.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, Suresh. Yeah,
Okay.
makes sense. Yeah.
Good. Super. Looks like a top of the hour. We'll go tomorrow. We'll just go and talk about outbound integration, boomerang integration on a very high level. I want to cover inbound integration a little more detail. That's why it took more time, right? Otherwise, this we can just go through on a high level how it is. So, okay, we have the same way how we have designed Studio or inbound integrations, outbound integrations, you are picking a data from Workday and then sending the data to downstream system actually, right? So in that case, you will be selecting which data source from where I'm taking the data, and then do I have to do any validation, right? Is there any, there is no Workday validation that we wanted for outbound integration because the data itself we are fetching from Workday, correct? So what we need only the field validation. Do you want the data to be sent as it is, or you want to trim the data, or you want to add the data, you want to transform the data? All those part will be coming as part of your field validation or transformation part. And once you get the data, do the field validation or transformation, do the logics, and send the data to downstream system. There is no log file that we wanted for outbound integration because we are just fetching the data and sending the downstream system. Your output file is the log actually, right? It is nothing but it'll act as a log. Yeah. So that's how your outbound integration, all the structures are same, and only this field Workday validation alone will not be there, and log file will not be there. Rest all will be same. Okay, so that is for Workday validation. Sorry, that is for outbound integration. Boomerang, in case if you have heard my demo, I've mentioned that actually. So you have a timer, for example. Every year, what happens? You have a, um, uh, let's put it this way. You have to consume the leaves that you have by end of year, right? There'll be some cap actually, right? You can carry forward only 10 leaves only. Remaining leaves will get lapsed, right? Then in that case, what you have to do, you have to go and check whether that particular employee, how many leaves that employee has, right? And if that leaves are consumed by the employee, and if it is not consumed, then you go and update the leave back to 10, for example. Okay, so here, um, so here employee has a 10 leaves. Okay, 10 leave. Okay, let's put this way. 15 leaves he has it. You should consume all the at least come on, he has 15 leaves end of the year, but he can carry forward only 10 leaves actually, right? Then what we have to do, we have to go and reduce 5 leaves because he hasn't consumed the leaves. Then what we do, using boomerang integration, we go and pick up the leave for an employee, how many leaves he has, and then we'll check whether the leave number is greater than 10, because that's the number that we are giving to employee. If it is more than 10, then remove the remaining leaves and then update it as only 10 because you can't carry forward more than 10. So in this case, from Workday, you are fetching the leave and then doing the calculation and then updating back to Workday saying that the leaves are updated to 10, from 15 to 10, it is updated. Okay. This is just one of the situation where you will go for a boomerang integration. Yeah. That's about it. On a very high level type of integrations, we'll go a little more detail. Coming for, I mean, in the coming days actually.